prepared this canvas previously so that it's completely dry, and you can get the best effect if you do allow your painting to totally dry at this point. Notice that I can rub my hand completely across it and nothing moves. For glazing to work properly, you do need to have a dry surface. If you work with a surface that's tacky, glazing will still work as long as you only lay a little bit of paint on at the time, and in very thin layers, but only one layer at a time. If you want to come back and glaze again a third or a fourth time even, that can be done, and you'll get beautiful effects, but you need to let it dry between each stage. Because of our filming limitations today, I've prepared a second canvas so that we can continue with the painting. Once you do the glazing, you don't need to let the painting dry before you continue on to the opaque or finishing stages of the painting. It's only at the first stage. The painting at this stage is not what I consider a painting. It really is just a drawing in color. It's a value drawing. And the stage that I work in getting the values and the local colors on the canvas, right up to the point where I begin to add my opaques, I call the underpainting. That includes laying it on in the first stage, as you just observed, and it also includes the stage that I'm going to apply now, which will be the glazing that goes over this. Once I've got my values correct and most of the color corrections made, then I will consider the underpainting to be finished, and I'll move on to what I call the overpainting. And that's the point where I lay the opaques over the underpainting that's been set up in the earlier phases. There's nothing at this stage that is inviolable that I can't change or that I might not change. The painting is in flux. It's going to move. Some of the shapes may change, the colors definitely will change, and this is the point where I begin to refine not only colors but the values of all of the different masses in the painting. Until I get to the overpainting opaque phase, I won't do anything to the sky area. The white of the canvas will remain white. No paint will go on to it. If it bothers you, you may add just a thin light coat of whatever color you would like to paint the sky. It could be a pale blue, a pale gray, if you don't want to work with the white canvas. But I find the white canvas to be a nice bright contrast to the darks that I'm laying on. I'll be working with the same medium to thin my paints. And now what I want to do is to get the colors of each of the individual parts, that is the red tree and those of the green tree, to feel like they belong together a bit more. I have the basic character of this tree, the red tree, laid down at the first stage. I may lay many colors over it, but that red is always going to come through as long as what I put on top of it is transparent. So the character will never go away unless I paint it opaquely, which I will not paint it opaquely. It will always be transparent. There are three things that you want to try to accomplish in the glazing phase, and that is to create a color excitement, refine the values, and to create three-dimensional form. Once you've got the local color of the mass laid down, and local color is that single color that you would describe something. If someone asks you, what color is that tree? Well, this one is green, and this one is a red-violet. That's what local color is. Doesn't mean that there can't be other colors in among it, those colors, but the local color will describe it as a single adjective. When we're laying on glazes, it's best to use pure pigment. The transparent colors themselves are going to lay over something that's already painted. For instance, I have a thin ultramarine blue on my brush. As I lay it, and you might take a closer look at this, as I lay it over the area that's been previously painted, you can see it affects it, but it doesn't paint it blue. If it were blue, it would be that color. See, that's the color that's on my brush. Now, I'm not going to leave that blue out there, and this is how easy you can change things like that. But you see, you don't have to mix colors to glaze over something that's already been painted. When I glaze, I'm going to be a bit more particular about where I put colors and the shapes that they create. Remember that when you glaze, whatever you're glazing over gets darker. So you only want to glaze in areas that you want to be darker. In this case, the light source is from the left, so all of those shapes that are on the left side of our forms will be lighter in value, ultimately, and those shapes that are on the right side will be darker and cooler, darker in value and cooler in color. The coolest colors on the palette are going to be our ultramarine blue and dioxazine purple and some combination of those. So those are naturals for me to put into the areas that will be in the shadows, within the shadows of the tree and on the shadow side of the tree. If you lay pure colors in, then you can get some excitement happening. Now, I don't cover the area completely because I want some of the original color that was there to show through. Notice that I'm not taking individual little strokes either. I'm still thinking in terms of masses. That is, I want to indicate the shadowed nature of this tree. Even on the light side, if there's an underside of the clump of foliage, it will have shadows as well. Moving on to the other trees, I can begin to relate the green trees to the red tree by using some of the same color combinations. That is, I'll add blue into the shadows of the green trees. Now, blue isn't going to be the only color that I use, but I do like to use the color wherever I think it might serve the purpose while I'm working with a single color. That way I don't inadvertently get everything mixed together and come out with the same color everywhere. Glazing is a selective thing. I'm not going to put glazes everywhere on this painting. Only in a few places and in the colors that I feel they're going to be most appropriate. Tree trunk, that's shadow. The light that's illuminating the shadows is from the sky, which I'm going to paint blue eventually, and I can throw some of these blue colors into the shadows, the cast shadows, wherever they fall. Now, to relate the red tree to some of the colors in the green tree so that they don't remain too separate. They are, after all, in the same landscape. Not only that, this red tree is an open form, and we can see behind it to some of the green trees that are behind there. So adding some of the greens from the trees that surround it into the red tree is going to make it feel like it belongs to this environment a little bit more than if I just leave it there as a red-violet tree all by itself. It will seem like it doesn't belong anywhere in the painting. To make a painting have unity, you need to repeat the colors that occur in one area throughout the painting. Doesn't mean that the entire painting is going to be the same color, but if there's a major portion of one particular color in one area, it needs to be repeated in the foliage next to it, on the ground, in the shadows, so that the entire thing feels like it all belongs together and you haven't cut it out and pasted it together from separate sources. So I will mix some of the green that I used in the earlier phase from my transparent yellow and ultramarine blue. And I'm going to carefully place some of that in the shadow areas of this red tree. Green and red are complementary colors, and to subdue a color that's too bright, the natural choice is to use its complement over it. So this red tree then is going to be subdued by the addition of its complement. If we had mixed these colors together originally to put on the canvas, we'd have ended up with a brown tree, because complementary colors mixed together make neutrals. Brown is a wonderful neutral. We wouldn't have got the play of color that we get by using complements next to each other, the way we'll get when we do it this way. I'm placing these colors so that I don't completely cover the canvas. I want some of the red and the pink to show through. Now, the red tree is beginning to feel like it belongs to the rest of the painting just a bit more. One thing I'd like to point out is that rarely do I paint just in one place. The painting is taking place all over the canvas at once, not in one particular place. So I may skip around, and when I'm working in one area, move way over to another, and that's a natural inclination to try to unify the painting with color, just as I did with the blue that I laid on first. I put it in one area, and I also placed it in the flanking areas. Whenever I add a color, you'll see me moving around over the canvas, just so that I repeat that color. I don't want one color ever to be lonely all by itself. That's what will make it stand out and not feel like it belongs to the painting. Okay, I've added some greens to the red-violet tree and some blues. Now let's go in with what some have termed as my favorite color, and that's dioxazine purple. I confess I do have an affinity for dioxazine purple. I think it's lovely in the shadow areas, and when it's glazed over these initial phases, if you can come and look closely at this area, I think you'll see a lovely play of color between the underpainting, which was the light green, then some of the blue that was glazed in, and then the purple laying over it. Each little piece can be a wonderful little place to see color excitement happening. Also, the purple was used in the red tree originally, so this color serves to unify the green mass with the red-violet tree. You don't want to paint it to the point that the green tree begins to feel like the red-violet tree, but we are going to relate these with an introduction of some of the color elements from one into the other. You may have noticed that there are little specks of white that were unpainted from the original lay-in of color, and I find those the places that can give me little sparkles of jewels when I glaze over, particularly in an area like this. Once again, we're seeing the purple and the blue and the green, and we're not getting mud. I dare say if you try this with opaque paints, with all of these complementary colors, you'd not be getting jewel tones. You'd be getting something else entirely. You might think of this stage as painting the foliage that's inside the tree that you're seeing the backside of. When you look at a tree, being the open form that it is, of course you see the leaves and foliage that are on the side facing you, but what you also see is the spaces that allow you to look within the tree to the backside. And those areas are what make the tree look dark, because they're all in shadow. Shadow areas are the places that provide the greatest opportunity for color. If you will paint the shadow areas cool and colorful, then when you lay the local color of the highlights on in the opaque phase, there'll be a wonderful contrast of not only a temperature change, but the contrast between the opaque and the transparent gives an immediate separation and creating depth in the painting. For some reason, the opaque color next to a transparent automatically feels like it has some forward position. So that's what we're doing, is we're creating the cool darks that will be seen inside the tree. Notice that I'm adding this particularly into the right side of each of the forms, as well as the underside of the clumps, because that's where your shadowed areas would occur. So we're creating in this glazing not only beautiful color, but three-dimensional form. And the third thing is that we're darkening the value, because every time we lay one layer of color over another, it goes darker. And just as a tip for you, let me suggest that when you're working with transparent colors, you back away from your painting and look at it, because they look lighter up close than they do when you back away from it. And you can get your colors too dark too quickly. Little blue, and with the purple in those background trees. Can never have too much color. Remember, color can be subdued more easily than it can be revived. At least I find that to be true. Working mostly with pure color, ultramarine blue and dioxazine purple have been the primary hues that I'm working with. If you back away from your painting at many stages, then you will get a better idea of whether the values are working for you. That is, have you arrived at the point that you want to be in terms of the value relationship of light to a little darker to a lot darker. One thing I would like to point out too is that at this phase, I would recommend that you do attempt to get the little white tooth of the canvas that may have been left in the earlier stages concealed with color. Now this is an opportunity to add color in those little places where they'll sparkle like little gems. And you won't make mud. If this were wet and I was laying that alizarin crimson over that green, it would turn brown. We wouldn't have those nice, beautiful little jewel-like flesh tones that have developed in this area. Glazing is something that can be done at any point in the painting as long as the painting underneath is dry. There's no set rule that says you have to do it only at this point. When the painting is finished, or when you're finished painting for the day, you come back to it several days later and there's something that you might want to change in terms of value, particularly if you want a darker value. One way to make that change and make it very nicely is to glaze the color change or value change in. But the painting, even if it's finished with the opaques, must be completely dry. I find that some of the most wonderful things that happen on the canvas happen after that stage. I may leave a painting for several weeks after it's dry, then come back and add some of these little jewel tones that you see going in at this phase.